So I finished the main story of Star Wars Outlaws, and I gotta say, it wasn't what I was expecting, in good ways and in bad ways. I want to set the record straight before we get started. This is my first Ubisoft open world single player game, and I have no reference of any of their work in the past, and I don't play single player all that often, but I am a Star Wars fan, but I haven't enjoyed a fair share of the Disney era Star Wars games, or anything Star Wars that Disney has produced. So I'm coming at this from a Star Wars fan who is starved of good Star Wars games, and just a gamer who doesn't really care about the publisher who makes the game. So long as it's good and satisfies my criteria, I'm not going to complain that much. But now that we have that out of the way, let's go over what I like and don't like about Star Wars Outlaws. I'll start with what I don't like, and that's the lazy writing that this game has. This game's story has a surprising amount of potential. I found myself really enjoying the story as I played through various locations, but just as I was really getting into it, they would ruin it with some stupid dialogue. It would be a somewhat emotional scene, but then you're hit with something like, "But Kay, you'll surely get blasted!" Or even worse, "Kay, are you okay?" Yes, that's a real line in this game. It wouldn't have taken that much effort for them to get the dialogue to sync up with the depth and scope of the plot. As someone who was still really upset that we never got Star Wars 1313, I was excited to have another Star Wars game that didn't focus on another Order 66 survivor and tons of fan service to keep the player interested. There was still some fan service in this game, but it didn't overshadow the new characters I was introduced to, which I appreciated. However, it was ruined at key moments due to the fact that the writers just seemed to not want to finish the writing. The bones of the story were there, but it's bogged down by so much unnecessary and poor writing that I got pulled out of the story more often than I would like to admit. The writing would have been serviceable in 2008, but we're not in 2008. So I'm not sure who thought it was a good idea to greenlight 75% of this script. It was so disappointing. Now, I'm used to the in-depth story of BioWare games, from Mass Effect to Star Wars The Old Republic, so maybe I'm just a spoiled brat when it comes to that part, but just when you were hooked on the scene, you were slapped in the face by some lame line that didn't need to be there. The next thing I absolutely did not like at all was the lazy animation, and this was probably more egregious for other people, but if I had to choose between bad animation and bad writing, I would choose the former. However, that doesn't mean the animation in this game gets a pass, because there was only one other thing that kept pulling me out of the story: terrible animation and inconsistencies in cutscenes. There were basically 4 different types of cutscenes in this game. You had your in-world scenes where it's going to be bad because you're out in the open world and that part's fine. Then you'd have the in-game cinematics that were supposed to be good but not over the top, but then you had your straight cinematics that are used to detail pivotal moments in the story. Not once in any of these cutscenes did it even look like their mouths were speaking the appropriate words. It was jarring, especially in the supposed top-of-the-line cutscenes. Everything just looked weird. I don't know if they didn't have expensive enough motion tracking equipment, but this looked extremely rushed, almost like no thought was put into the animation whatsoever. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, I would have rather had bad animation than bad writing and story. I could forgive the cheap animation because I was really invested in the story. There were so many times where I just looked at it and thought, damn, I'd be so much more into this if it didn't have animations from The Force Unleashed. For a game that costs $70, you would expect that they could do 2024 animation, or at least something on par with Red Dead Redemption 2, which I've never played, but the cutscenes look way better than what Outlaws has to offer. The third thing I did not like was the bad sound effects. This was another immersion-breaking experience. Kay's blaster sounded like a toy, much less an actual blaster. Again, it just seems so rushed and cheap. I promise I'm not just reusing the same lines from the last section, but it just seems to be a recurring thing in this game. Sometimes the sound works well, but when it matters most, I am left underwhelmed and honestly just annoyed. Battlefront 2015 had so much better sounds, it made Outlaws sound like an arcade game. Honestly, these were my 3 main complaints with the game. Now, some people say I just have low standards to even like this game, but I think I'm just a guy who likes games and doesn't really care too much about the publisher Ubisoft, which is why I'm not not going into them like a lot of other people seem to. But here's what I really liked about the game. The story was really enjoyable for me. Like I said in the writing portion, I was really into what was going on in the world. Just when I thought it was going to be another typical heist story, there was a twist that made me think, oh shit, this is actually interesting. My favorite character was ND5, who for a droid had a surprising amount of depth. He could have been a lot better, but again, the writing. Damn, the writing really ruins a lot of parts of this game. Gdeek was a nice side character, and I found myself a little bit more interested in his backstory, which I'm hoping they elaborate on in the future in some DLC. But as I said in the beginning, I like stories about smugglers, bounty hunters, and everyday people in the galaxy. To see the effects of the various wars and major events on more than just some Force-sensitive Luke Skywalker wannabe. I think there's a lot of potential to flesh out Kay as a character who has a solid foundation, but again, is hamstrung by the writing. The game didn't lean too much into the girl boss aspect nearly as much as I thought it was, which was nice. Mainly because you can have a girl boss protagonist without making it the entire character identity, and I feel like Ubisoft did a good job with this, but that could change in upcoming DLC. The next thing I liked about it was the open world. I come from a heavy MMORPG background, so I'm more critical of the term open world than most. When it comes to Star Wars Outlaws, I found myself rather impressed with the scale of a planet. I was expecting more of an open world like corridor feel, but on planets like Tasharo and Akivo, it kind of felt like I could explore in any direction. This was also felt on planets like Tatooine, but I think that's more natural because of it being an open desert planet, but it really did feel like no matter where I was, I could go in any direction and find something to do, something to explore, or enemies to run away from. After I completed the story, I found myself not wanting to put the game down. I wanted to head back into the galaxy and explore the open world and do side quests for the various syndicates. This is something that I never did in solo player games that had an open world feature, mainly because I never felt the need to progress after the story was done. I'm used to doing those types of things in MMOs, so I was pleasantly surprised to have an urge to go back into the game after the story was completed. While the open world isn't perfect, it was enough for me to continue playing. I had gone away on vacation for over a week, and when I came back, I wanted to get back on Outlaws and continue to quest. So I feel like if that happens for me, the game isn't as bad as the gaming cognoscenti would have you think. So here are my final takeaways for Star Wars Outlaws. I really enjoyed playing through it. It's definitely become my casual game if I have a spare hour during the week and don't have time to get into something a little deeper. I'm sure many gamers who are more advanced and knowledgeable in the single player experience probably don't have this game in the top 100, but for me personally, I found it to be worth the money I paid for it. Now, the game isn't perfect and has substantial issues. I'd like to see them do better sound design in the future, along with the graphics and animation updates in the upcoming DLC. There isn't really an excuse for the game to look this bad in 2024 when we have so much better technology available to us. I'd like to see major writing improvements. That was probably the worst part of the game for me. They have plenty of characters that could become fan favorites if they just took a little bit more time crafting dialogue and really creating a strong narrative that makes us care about them. I personally don't need to see any more of Rico, that's Kay's mom. We really don't need another protagonist with mommy or daddy issues. That's lazy writing and an overused aspect of character development. But in the end, I found myself pleasantly surprised with Star Wars Outlaws at the end. I would probably give this a 7 out of 10 barely. I think it would be pure delusion to give it an any higher rating, and I'm sure a lot of other people would rate this lower, but again, coming from my lack of single player experience over the last 10 years and just taking it for what it is, I think it's fine. What do you guys think of Star Wars Outlaws if you've played it? If you haven't played it, let me know why in the comment section. I'm really interested to hear everyone's take on why they like or don't like this game. But can I recommend the game to you? I think you should play it if you're just looking for another game to play, like a filler game or something like that. By no means is this game of the year, but it's also not the worst game of 2024, which a lot of people are seeming to think it is. And again, maybe that's because I don't care as much about the details of the publisher and this and that. I just play games for fun, and I think that's what gives me a little bit more of an unbiased perspective when it comes to games nowadays. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to subscribe. I upload every 2 weeks, that's the goal. And if you want to watch more content like why Minecraft is so strong, or why Star Wars The Old Republic is the best MMO ever produced in a Star Wars IP, links are down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Noble. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.